Too thought I had been careful. Every excuse, every alibi, every perfectly timed message had been designed to avoid suspicion. I told myself I had everything under control, that no one would ever find out. But in a single moment, all of it came crashing down. I was sitting across from him, the man who had become my escape. His hand brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. It was innocent, at least that's what I told myself. Just a conversation, just a connection that made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. I laughed at something he said, tilting my head slightly, letting him see that I was listening, that I cared. And then I saw him, standing by the entrance, still as a statue. My husband. His face gave nothing away, no anger, no confusion, just a piercing, unreadable stare that sent a wave of cold panic through my body. My heart slammed against my chest, my fingers, once relaxed, clenched into fists on my lap. I couldn't move. His eyes stayed locked on mine, not even glancing at the man across from me. He wasn't looking for answers. He already knew. A slow, heavy silence stretched between us, drowning out the noise of the cafe. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded into nothing. It was just him and me, caught in a moment I could never undo. I opened my mouth, desperate to say something, anything that would make this disappear. But nothing came. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't look away. My mind raced through 1,000 excuses. It's not what it looks like. He's just a friend. You're overreacting. But none of them would work, because he had seen it. The way I leaned in just a little too close, the way my smile lingered, the way my fingers had rested just briefly against another man's hand. I had no defense, no escape. The man sitting across from me cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. He must have felt the shift in the air, must have realized something wasn't right. But I couldn't focus on him anymore. My husband exhaled slowly, then turned. Without a word, without a single question, he walked away. I shot up from my seat, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My pulse was a frantic drum in my ears. "Wait!" But he didn't stop. He just kept walking, and I stood there, frozen, knowing that I had just shattered something that could never be put back together. In the beginning, everything felt perfect, the kind of love that made people believe in forever. Late-night conversations that never felt long enough, stolen kisses in the kitchen, and the way his eyes would light up when she walked into a room. He was thoughtful in all the ways that mattered, always remembering the little things. Her favourite coffee order, the song she hummed absent-mindedly, the way she needed complete silence to fall asleep. Marriage had been an easy decision, one that felt natural, inevitable. And for years it worked. Their life was steady, predictable, built on routine and trust. There were no screaming fights, no betrayals, just two people who had promised to always be enough for each other. But then something shifted. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened. Maybe it was gradual, a slow unravelling of what once felt so certain. He started coming home later, exhausted from work, retreating into the silence of his own thoughts. Their conversations became shorter, more practical. Dinner plans, bills, the occasional "how was your day?" that barely scratched the surface. The excitement faded, replaced by comfort, then by something dangerously close to boredom. And then there was him. It hadn't meant anything at first, just an old friend from college, someone she hadn't seen in years. The kind of person who popped up out of nowhere, sending a simple, unexpected message. "Hey, it's been forever. How have you been?" She had responded without thinking, telling herself it was nothing, just a friendly chat, harmless nostalgia. But harmless things have a way of growing into something more. The messages became frequent, slipping into the quiet spaces of her day. He made her laugh asked about things her husband hadn't in years. He remembered details she had long forgotten about herself. Slowly, without realizing it, she started looking forward to his name appearing on her screen. The first time they met for coffee, she told herself it was innocent, just catching up, just two old friends reminiscing. But the way he looked at her, the way he leaned in just a little too close, made something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. Then came the small lies. The text messages she quickly deleted, the excuses she made when her husband asked why she was smiling at her phone, the lunches that turned into late afternoons. Each step felt small, insignificant, until she looked back and realized how far she had gone. She convinced herself it was harmless, that she wasn't crossing any real lines. She still came home every night, still kissed her husband goodbye every morning. As long as she kept the two worlds separate, no one would ever know. She had everything under control, or at least that's what she thought. The front door clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing in the stillness of the house. She hesitated, fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. Something felt different. The air was heavier, the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that warned something was coming. Then she saw him. He was sitting at the dining table, hands folded in front of him, eyes locked onto her. Not angry, not sad, just watching. Her stomach twisted. "You're home early," she said, forcing a smile, trying to keep her voice light. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. A slow, creeping fear crawled up her spine. "Is something wrong?" He leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Where were you?" Her breath caught. She had expected this, had practiced a dozen different responses in her head. But now, standing in front of him, every excuse she had prepared suddenly felt useless. "I told you I was out with... Don't lie to me." His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something unshakable. Her mouth went dry. "I saw you." He didn't blink, didn't move, just let the words settle between them like a weight pressing down on her chest. She forced a nervous laugh. "Saw me where?" His jaw tightened. "At the cafe." A slow, suffocating panic wrapped around her ribs. "You were with him." His voice didn't rise, didn't break. It was steady, controlled, but she could feel the storm behind it. "You touched him. You laughed. You looked at him the way you used to look at me." A sharp inhale burned her lungs. "It wasn't—" "Don't," he cut in. "Don't insult me with excuses." She swallowed hard. The usual lies felt useless now. She had always been good at talking her way out of things, at twisting words until they didn't sound as bad as they really were. But this time there was no twisting it. His eyes stayed on hers, unblinking. "How long?" Her lips parted, but nothing came. "How long?" he asked again, softer this time. She shook her head, a silent plea. "It's not what you think." His smile was hollow. "No? Then tell me what it is, because from where I was standing it looked like my wife was on a date with another man." A sharp, painful silence stretched between them. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to undo it. But for the first time she realized there was no way out. No excuse, no escape. Just the truth, ugly, exposed, impossible to run from. The house didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't the place she had built with him, filled with warmth and quiet understanding. Now it was just walls, empty spaces, and the unbearable weight of his silence. He didn't look at her the same way. His eyes, once filled with love, were distant, unreadable. He wasn't cruel, didn't lash out, didn't throw accusations. That would have been easier. Instead, He moved through their shared life like a ghost, present but unreachable. She tried to fix it. She told him she was sorry, that it hadn't meant anything, that she still loved him. She said all the words she was supposed to say, hoping they would somehow erase the damage. But he didn't believe her. Not once did he raise his voice. Not once did he ask why she had done it. He just nodded at her apologies, gave her small, empty smiles, and kept his distance. It was the distance that hurt the most. She would reach for him at night, but he wouldn't turn toward her. His body was there, but his heart wasn't. She would try to talk to him over dinner, but he only responded with short, polite sentences, as if she were a stranger making small talk. She wanted him to scream, to throw something, to let his anger spill out in any way that proved there was still something left to fight for, but he didn't. And that's when she knew she had already lost him. The changes were slow at first, subtle, just enough for her to notice, but not enough to confront. He stopped texting like he used to. No more check-ins during the day. No more, "What do you want for dinner?" No more, "Be safe," when she left the house. His phone, once left on the counter without a second thought, was always with him now. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was overthinking things because of her guilt. But then he started coming home late, some nights without warning. No explanation, no apology, just silence. When she asked where he had been, he only smiled. "I was out." That was it. No anger, no accusations. Just those 3 words and a look that made her stomach twist into knots. For the first time, she felt the same sickening uncertainty that she had once forced him to feel. The waiting, the wondering, the fear of knowing something was wrong but not being able to prove it. She stayed up late, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of the door unlocking. Some nights he came home and slipped into bed without a word. Other nights she woke up alone. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was he with someone? Had he already moved on? Was he doing this just to hurt her, to make her feel the same ache that had broken him? Then she saw the message. His phone had lit up on the table while he was in the shower, just for a second, but that second was long enough. "Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you." The words blurred as her breath caught in her throat. Her hands shook as she set his phone down. She could barely breathe. When he walked back in, she tried to keep her voice steady. "Who is she?" He glanced at the phone on the table, then back at her. A slow, amused smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Now you understand." Her heart pounded. "You're doing this on purpose." He shrugged, reaching for his shirt. "I don't owe you an explanation." Tears burned behind her eyes. "I told you I was sorry." He buttoned his cuffs, his movements relaxed, effortless. "So did I." She clenched her fists. "Is this what you want? To hurt me?" He met her gaze, unblinking. "I just want you to feel what I felt." The words hit harder than any scream, any slap, any angry fight ever could. She had thought she could live with the guilt, but nothing had prepared her for the pain of knowing she was no longer the most important person in his life. She sat at the dining table, staring at the blank piece of paper in front of her. Words. She needed the right words, words that could make him understand, could make him see that she was still here, still fighting for them. But nothing she wrote felt strong enough to undo what she had done. The first draft was too desperate. I was selfish, and I wasn't thinking about what I had to lose. But I swear to you, I never wanted to lose you. She crumpled it. The second was too cold. I made a mistake. But if you're punishing me to make me feel what you felt, then we're both just breaking each other over and over again. Another ball of paper tossed aside. Her hands shook as she reached for another sheet. One last try. I love you. That was the only truth left. When he came home that night, she placed the letter on his nightstand. He saw it, glanced at it, but didn't reach for it. He didn't even acknowledge it. She wanted to scream at him to just read it, to listen, to give her something, anything. But she stayed silent, watching as he took off his watch, set down his keys, and went about his night like she wasn't even there. The next morning, the letter was gone. She wanted to believe that meant something, that maybe he had read it, that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. But when she saw it later, folded and untouched in the trash, her chest caved in. She found him in the living room, standing near the window, looking out at nothing in particular. Her voice was unsteady. Are you really not going to talk to me? His head tilted slightly, but he didn't turn to face her. What is there to say? Her breath hitched. Anything. That you're angry, that you still love me, that you hate me. I don't care. Just say something. He was quiet for a long moment before he finally turned. I don't hate you. She felt the tiniest flicker of relief, but it vanished the second he spoke again. I just don't care anymore. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out beneath her. She searched his face for something, some trace of the man she had built her life with, but he was gone. Not physically, but emotionally. The worst part was knowing she had done this. She stepped closer, hesitating before reaching for his hand. He didn't move, didn't pull away, but he didn't hold her back either. Tears welled in her eyes. Please don't do this. His voice was quiet but firm. You already did. A sob rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. I can be better. He sighed, pulling his hand away. I don't want you to be better. I wanted you to be mine. She shook her head, her vision blurred. I still am. He exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. No, you're not. Not really. The moment you made that choice, you stopped being mine. Her chest felt hollow. So that's it? His jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. He looked like he wanted to say something else, something final, but instead he just nodded. Yeah. The word was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it shattered her. She wanted to hold on to him, to plead, to fight, but there was nothing left to fight for. He had already let her go. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, but nothing changed. The weight of it all still sat heavy in her chest, pressing down on her every time she opened her eyes in the morning and every time she closed them at night. She had thought time would help, that somehow the pain would dull, that life would push her forward whether she was ready or not. But all it did was remind her of everything she had lost. The silence of her apartment was unbearable. She had never been good at being alone. Before, she never had to be. There was always someone. Her husband, her friends, even him, the man who had made her feel alive in all the wrong ways. But now, no one was left. She had tried reaching out to him, the one she had risked everything for, but his messages had stopped the moment everything fell apart. He had gotten what he wanted, the thrill, the chase, the stolen moments, but he had never planned to stay. That was the hardest part to accept. She had destroyed something real for something that was never meant to last. Her ex-husband, had moved on. She had seen it with her own eyes. A picture on social media, one she had stared at far too long. He wasn't alone anymore. There was a woman beside him, smiling, looking at him the way she used to. He looked different too, lighter, happier, like he had let go of everything that had once held him down. She wasn't part of his life anymore, and that hurt more than anything. She thought about the day he had walked away from her, The way his voice had been so steady when he told her he didn't hate her, that he just didn't care anymore. She had begged him to stay, to give her one more chance, to let her fix what she had broken. But he hadn't. And now she understood why. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals don't come with second chances. She had spent so much time believing she deserved more that she was missing something in her life. But all she had done was take the one thing she could never replace and throw it away. She had told herself it was harmless, that she was in control, that no one would ever know. She had been wrong about everything. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't bother wiping it away. She had cried enough. It didn't change anything. There was no going back, no fixing what had been broken. She had learned her lesson, but too late. And the worst part? She would have to live with that for the rest of her life.